Hey everyone, Morgan here. So today I want to talk about the longevity of fuel sources and energy sources and how we can plan to have these energy and fuel sources around, or if we can have, basically just the reality of our energy and fuel sources and how these things are going to really realistically be around and how long. Because when we think about a lot of the things that we prep for, like let's say, I'm going to try to stay super on topic, I got a lot to talk about, but let's say that you're relying on your gas, okay? You have gas from your city, you pay for it, natural gas, right? It comes into your home, you use it for cooking, heating, whatever. Like us, we use it for cooking and heating. And, and then we have electricity as separate. So when electricity goes out locally, our gas locally still is flowing. However, many natural gas facilities run on electricity, okay? So on a local scale though, your natural gas will still flow in an emergency or disaster. However, if it were a national scale blackout, the natural gas, it would be highly unlikely that the natural gas would still flow unless that natural gas was powered by natural gas, which I think is really rare if it still happens these days. But mostly the natural gas is run by electricity. But on a local scale, you're still able to get that natural gas because, let's say the power goes out, in your neighborhood, or, very rarely is the power outage going out throughout the entire city. So that's why your natural gas is usually still flowing. Now, if you have propane at your house, that's coming from a very specific tank, okay? However, I want to make it very clear that we shouldn't rely on the natural gas or, the propane or whatever it is if it's coming from an outside source, okay? So it's like relying on the water to still flow through your pipes. You're relying on a service that you cannot control. So you do not want to rely on those services just being there, in an emergency or disaster. Now, it's super nice that they're there. That's great. Take advantage of it. But you need to have alternative sources for that heating, for the cooking, for boiling water, okay? You need to have those alternative energy and fuel sources. So here are some alternatives that, still require us to stock up. So wood. If you're going to be using a barbecue or a fire pit, you need either wood, charcoal, anything that will burn basically. And so how much of that do you have available to you? Can you just walk out and go cut down a tree for this fuel source, right? So you can have it for your barbecue or for your fire pit, right? And then we also have to think about the security aspect of making a fire or using your barbecue. They are great off-grid sources, but if you live in like an urban environment, like we have a fire pit and we have a barbecue, but in an urban environment, it probably wouldn't be the best option to use that fire pit or the barbecues for security reasons. If people see that smoke or they smell that food, right? The food on the barbecue cooking, right? You could potentially be putting yourself in a very threatening situation, very dangerous situation, being threatened, right? So that may not be the best option. Now, we're talking about like SHTF, right? In some sort of just small emergency or disaster situation, I don't see really any too big of a problem using your fire pit and stuff. Most people are going to be staying indoors, or they're going to be, doing whatever, going to a restaurant that has electricity, kind of focusing on their own thing, right? And this would really be a major concern if it's getting down to that sort of, SHTF situation where people are, there's no more food elsewhere, you don't want to draw attention to yourself, all that kind of thing. You never want to draw attention to yourself, but that is besides the point of fuel sources. So wood, can you go out? How much wood do you have? Do you have, extra charcoal or wood chips or whatever it is that you can use as a small fire maybe? A couple other things that use fire but don't use as much like resources as a fire might would be something like a rocket stove or a hobo stove or things like that, in which they use a much smaller amount of resources, but they still get a really good, you know, boil going. They get it's a nice heat source. A rocket stove in particular is actually a really great resource, DIY project for really great cooking resource. And we also have to think about when we're using fuel sources, how often are you going to be using these fuel sources? Are you going to be using it to boil a lot of water? Are you going to be using it to cook 3 meals a day? The Lord Humongous actually had a video a while ago that was talking about how he was going to be eating 1 meal a day, just one, you know, get all of the calories that it needs. It's kind of like with dogs. They either eat once or twice a day. They get all the calories they need and they're good to go. You know, so you may want to consider doing more of like a cook 1 meal, eat that 1 meal, get all your calories, and then, you know, don't cook 3 meals a day, because then that would just be using, you know, a bunch of fuel sources that maybe you just don't need to do. Now, this also depends on whether you have kids. You know, kids need to eat a little bit more, but they may not need to eat, you know, food that needs to be heated all the time, right? You know, get a bunch of snacks, you know, non-perishable snacks that they love. You know, my daughter just snacks all the time, and it's not always, you know, food that I actually have to heat up or, you know, for her and that kind of thing. So I digress. You know, is it easy for you to go get wood, or how much wood you have stocked up, that kind of thing? You know, would you be able to securely go get wood? You know, that's another thing. Okay, so the next fuel source is going to be like Mre heaters. You know, those heat things. They don't really cook things, you know what I mean? And so it's the same with, I did this little heater type of thing that was kind of like the Mre concept, but it heats things. It doesn't really cook things, you know what I mean? You could probably make it work to cook things, but they're really not made for that. They are heaters, they're not cookers. But they could be used to heat things if you needed that. I have my notes here. But, you know, with the Mre heaters, you know, you gotta have the Mre heaters, right? You gotta stock up on that a little bit. And they're nice and small and flat, you know, easy to stock up on if that's an option for you. Candles are also an option. You know, you can actually cook things with a candle, several candles, okay? You can't just have like, if you have like one massive candle, maybe, but you got to have that some sort of setup to where, you know, like if you have a gas stove, you can put the candles on the inside of that gas stove. You know, you have the grate up top, and then just put the pot, and then you have the candles, several candles, and it will take a little bit longer, but you can definitely cook with several candles. But that's a resource, okay? If you know how to make candles, then you can just kind of make candles. You know, you have beeswax or soy wax or whatever types of wax to make candles, then that's great. You can just kind of make candles. But again, you know, unless you have like your own beehives or something, or some way to get, you know, natural wax or something, then eventually your source of wax could disappear as well, right? But candles are an option. Another option is alcohol stoves. People love alcohol stoves, okay? And also like oil stoves, any type of oil or alcohol stoves, those kinds of things. People love those. I'm not a huge fan of them, but again, that's using a resource. That's using the alcohol or the olive oil or whatever it is. And you know, the fire, and to you know, to get that heat source, you know, to cook, or for, you know, a little bit of heat, right? A little bit of candle, you know, a little bit of light source, that kind of thing. But that's using a resource of the alcohol. So how much alcohol can you really stock up, right? Okay, and so then we have the propane butane, like camping stoves, you know, like those small propane butane stoves that you can use for like camp stoves, you know, like your Jetboil, things like that. Those are good, but you can really only stock up on so much of that stuff, right? Depending on your space, money, you know, whatever. And then, you know, you're using them. Now, those do actually last a long time. I had one in which I was using for camping just for like a couple of years, and I was really consistently using it. And those do last a long while, but, you know, if you're using it every single day, you know, especially if you're boiling water a lot, like that's one of your only, you know, sources for water purification, that's a lot of fuel sources to use, right? you know, eventually that's going to run out. Now, the last one I'm going to talk about is the energy, the sun. Okay. The sun is a great resource to use when it comes to cooking, preserving food. You can even purify water with the sun. Now, the sun is a great option for many places in this world, but it may not be the most perfect option for a lot of different seasonal times, right? In a lot of places. Now here in Texas, pretty much year round, the sun's gonna be great. It does not need to be summertime in order for solar to work, okay? You don't need like a hot day, you just need the sun, okay? You need direct sun. Using the sun to cook, cloud doesn't really work. You know, so you really do need pretty much direct sunlight when it comes to cooking and purification and stuff like that. The clouds aren't as effective. They can work, it just takes like a lot longer. But when we're coming down to it and looking at the longevity and the reliability of the fuel sources and energy sources that we have, we need to look at how we're going to use them in our preps and in our preparedness and our cooking, our water purification and all this stuff. You know, can I use a candle one day? Then I can use a propane the other day. Maybe it's a really sunny day. I can take my, you know, solar cooker out there and, you know, I don't have to use any fuel resources, right? You know, maybe we can just bundle up with blankets instead of, you know, using a fuel source to heat. You know, like there's a propane heaters out there, but instead of using that, you just bundle up real good, right? You know, there's lots of these ideas that we need to think of and properly prepare for this, because there's only so many resources that we can prep. There's only so much that we can prep and that we can do, and in some areas are going to be easier for you to just go out and chop down some trees, right? Not so good in a lot of city urban areas maybe. But there's also other resources like burning books. The cringing at the thought, but that's a resource. Burning other types of, you know, paper, anything that is burnable, okay? You can use those as resources. People in wartime experiences, you know, they were using anything literally that would burn for their wood stoves, for heat sources and things. So that's just something to consider. Basically anything that's gonna burn, you wanna start thinking about now, okay, well, what can I go scavenge to burn, you know, for heat or cooking or whatever the case may be. So anyway, I didn't talk anything about petrol, gas, you know, in this, not, you know, like gas that we use for our cars. I didn't talk about diesel, anything like that. That's a whole nother conversation, but I was just talking about fuel sources for cooking and heating, kind of home stuff. So anyway, I just wanted to get you guys thinking about this, and it's just good to be prepared and to have this knowledge, like this stuff, some of this stuff is finite. You know, some of this stuff is not going to last forever. You know, how much of the stuff can you actually prep? You know, how much of the stuff can you actually store? We just need to be prepared accordingly. Thank you all so much for watching. Conquer tomorrow by preparing today. Talk to y'all tomorrow. Bye.